The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the fifth ICLE webinar on the region's Talanoa dialogues. This is also towards COP24 webinar via Talanoa dialogues and also GCAS, taking place today on the 5th of September at 10 and 16 o'clock Central European Summer Time. My name is Jisun Hwang, Senior Climate Advocacy and Policy Officer at the ICLE World Secretariat, and I will be a panelist as well as the facilitator of today's webinar. And on behalf of ICLE, I would like to welcome you all. Now, before we start, I would like to quickly give you a technical introduction on some features of this webinar when it comes to the technicalities. So first of all, you will be automatically muted, and I would like to kindly ask you that you remain muted till the floor is opened in order to ensure a smooth proceeding of the presentations. Secondly, there is a box where you can type in your questions. So whenever you have questions during the webinar, please feel free to use this feature. And last but not least, this webinar is being recorded, and the recording of this webinar will be then shared throughout all the available channels, including the YouTube channel, in order to ensure transparency and information flowing. Now, with that, I would like to move to introduction of my fellow panelists. So I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Yunus Arikan, who is the head of global policy and advocacy at ICLE World Secretariat, who is also the local government and municipal authorities constituency focal point to the UNFCCC. And also today we have the pleasure and honor of having another panelist, Ms. Emmanuel Pino, who is the head of city diplomacy at C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group. Now with that, let's get started. So now, Yunus, over to you.
Thank you, Jisun. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues and gentlemen and ladies from all around the world who's joining this call, this webinar. Today's webinar will focus on three sections. We will go through the latest updates on Talanoa, then we will have an update on the global climate action, and then we will focus on the UNFCCC process. As you can see, and for those who have attended previous webinars, after a 3 months break, of course, it was a bit lengthy break between our last webinar, which was in May, and now, and there's also a lot of things happening in terms of agendas. So this webinar in that sense is a bit loaded, but we will do our best that this is finished in 1 hour, including interactions from participants, as Jisun mentioned, both through either questions, but also if needed, we can also open the floor for you when you can intervene. With this, let me immediately go to the first part. Let's recall Talanoa dialogue was an outcome of COP23. And when we started this year in 2018, we thought this is an opportunity, overall this Talanoa process is an opportunity to fix and lift NDCs and make them fit for Paris Agreement. The logic is that most of these national contributions to the Paris Agreement was prepared before Paris Agreement was adopted. And in the Paris Agreement, there is a number of new mechanisms or new vision. For example, for the first time, there is a recognition of engagement of all levels of government. And therefore, those documents which were prepared before Paris, of course, do not reflect the full spirit. So this is the logic that Talanoa dialogue is an opportunity to start preparing this, making them fit for Paris Agreement. And of course, over these years, things are also evolving, especially the real economy, the local and business and all the countries are advancing a lot. And in fact, NDCs are not reflecting the realities of today's in countries, many of the countries. Therefore, it's seen as if it's less ambitious, but we know the reality is much better than what is being presented. So this is an opportunity to start the discussion that a Talanoa dialogue is an inclusive process And we have two main goals. First of all, we know in many of those NDCs, the urban development is not fully reflected. So there is a need to reflect urban development, sustainable urban development to the climate action to bridge these two, and introducing urban development as an opportunity to raise ambitions. And of course, the second point is to engage all levels of government. This multi-level collaboration at the local, national, or subnational and in global level is now becoming a practice that is demonstrated very concretely and giving us the confidence that Paris Agreement will be successful with this vision. As of today, what we can tell is that that this is now showing us that we have 51 sessions worldwide that is scheduled since the beginning of the year. Some of those events announced have to be revised. Some of them are cancelled, but some new are coming up. So as of today, we are expecting that 41 of those events are confirmed. 10 are still to be seen in terms of timing or structures. These are taking place in 38 countries. We will see the list in a short while. And it's interesting that most of them are taking the global south, especially Africa and Asia, and also Latin America. That is really encouraging. And that is also showing that this debate is worldwide. So far, until July or August, around 30 or 29 of them have been realized, and we're expecting the next 22 to take place in the upcoming 3 months. Even some of them can be held in November. That's what we are expecting. We are encouraging all our colleagues and partners to submit their reports so that we can consolidate all of them for two reasons. One, and this is the key message from this meeting, as you may recall, the UNFCCC and the Fijian government, which is the presidency of this year, they have announced 29th of October as the deadline to submit inputs. Therefore, by this deadline, we would like to show how many sessions are taking place, how many local and regional governments are engaged, what type of outcomes, maybe not on the full details, but main outcomes that we'd like to ensure has taken place. So this is an input to the process, especially with a focus on the way forward. Meanwhile, we can come back to this. The unique conditions of COP24 in Katowice, that we are very likely that we will not prepare for a summit of cities and regions this year because of the hosting conditions. There is a tendency from our side as ICLE to encourage all the partners involved in Talanoa dialogues to consider a very brief common 10 points that we can work during the next couple of months. That is our input to the COP, in addition to this technical report, which is much more a political statement that is shared by all partners as much as possible. And that could be our key message that captures our inputs to the COP24, in particular to carry onwards the debate, which is multi-level governance in the Talanoa spirit, and hoping that it will continue forward. This list now, in the next 3 slides, I would go. You would see the countries and where these meetings are taking place. I will not go into all the details, also because of the time pressure, but this is a list that shows country by country. This includes both those events that has already taken place or those that are coming up. But here you can definitely see the diversity of partners, the diversity of countries, and the mechanisms. For example, in countries, there are interesting experiences. For example, in Japan, we have 4 Talanoa dialogues. So there different cities are taking, they're all connected to each other. Or in countries like Finland, or Norway, and even in India, we are expecting that those Talanoa dialogues will be held in collaboration with the national governments. Or in countries like Canada, even the indigenous people, indigenous communities coming up and joining the discussions. Or in Africa, we are announcing new collaborations, or in Ecuador or Chefchaouen, We are calling for calls for action with the Global Covenant. So each Talanoa is coming up with interesting results and conclusions. Therefore, we see this as a huge diversity. We see this as the reflection that local and regional governments are one of the most active community or stakeholders that respond to the Talanoa dialogue, and we will take this to our own benefit, which means that we'd like to continue this process, especially towards 2020, because many of the discussions that are just kicked off, or many of those experiences are just nourishing in time, and especially in 2019, when we are expecting the nations to come up with their more robust NDCs. During this 2 years ahead, we should be able to work together to go through the NDCs and to reflect our data, our commitments, our plans with the global, with the national partners. In this slide, you can see a template that is the key messaging around each of the questions, how we can capture the discussions, how we can track what has been put on the table, how these sessions were engaging all levels of government. This template is shared by partners to the partners. Just immediately alert us if you haven't received it yet, and we would recommend you to fill this form as quick as possible so that we can capture them in a consolidated report. With this, I'd like to conclude my intervention on Talanoa dialogues. I'm not sure, Jisun, whether there's any question especially for this round. If not, we can immediately go ahead with the next agenda item of this webinar.
Thank you, Yunus. At the moment, I see no questions on the question box, so let's just move immediately to the GCAS updates. Emmanuelle, over to you, and I will show the screen. Just a sec. All right, and then, all right, Emmanuelle, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jisun, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Emmanuel Pino. I'm the head of city diplomacy at C40, and I'm very glad to give you some updates today on the Global Climate Action Summit, which will happen next week in San Francisco, California, September 12 to 14. This summit has as a subtitle, Taking Ambition to the Next Level. And indeed, it has been created as an opportunity and a moment to step up climate action ahead of COP24, based on the leadership and the mobilization of non-state actors. Next slide, please. So many of you know already about the structure of the summit, so I'll go fast on this first part. Here you have the pictures of the summit co-chairs. It has been a unique alliance of leading constituencies and leading high-level spokesperson like Governor Brown, who's the host of the Summit of California, and leading the community of governors in this summit, Anand Mahindra, leading on the business community, Mike Bloomberg, who is, everybody knows him in his capacity of Vice Chair of the Global Covenant of Mayor and UN Special Envoy for Climate Action. And they've been joined by an eminent representative of the UN, Patrice Espinosa, of course, the UNFCCC Executive Secretary, who's been very supportive of the process and putting this important event into the UNFCCC agenda. And lately, perhaps something people know less, those 4 original co-chairs have been joined by 2 very important additions. Xiue Zhenghe, the former head of climate negotiations for China, who's joined also the summit, showing the importance that China gives to climate action in general and to the role of non-state actors. So this is a very, very important addition. And also to increase the mobilization of young people, the UN representative for the youth, Special Envoy for Youth, has joined also as a co-chair. And so here you see really an alliance of different constituencies and influencers who have come together to make of this summit a success and to make sure the outcomes are powerful and related to the global climate discussion. Next, please. Next slide. So on the next slide, we will see the 5 challenge areas where the summit, how the summit has been structured. Basically, it has been divided into 5 topics. Challenge area 1, healthy energy system. It's all about energy, and it's mainly led by the climate group, who is an important organization working across several constituencies, but particularly with business and regions. So this topic is the challenge area 1. Then inclusive economic growth. This is the topic for the business community, and BSR has been acting on behalf of the Women Business Coalition, coordinating this challenge area. Sustainable community, our challenge area for cities and human settlements. C40 has had the privilege to coordinate on behalf of the Global Covenant of Mayors this challenge area. I will give you more detail in this in a minute. Then we have, of course, a very important challenge area related to land and ocean stewardship, coordinated and led by WWF. And finally, a whole finance and investors agenda, transformative climate investments, who constitute the 5th challenge area of the summit, coordinated by CRS and representing, who's representing a coalition of different investors group. So you see here a very diverse and very robust group of non-state actors coming together to bring those topics in the climate discussion from the non-state actor perspective, and with a very strong focus on the commitments and the contributions that those sectors are making to the implementation of the Paris Agreement. Next slide, please. So specifically on the cities and sustainable community, we jointly, so C40 jointly with GCOM and ICLE in particular, have been working on something we call the GCAS City Challenge, which is an initiative related to the One Planet Charter launched last year by GCOM, C40 and ICLE. Basically, it's a whole architecture of commitments and pledges that cities are invited to undertake before GCAS, before the California Summit, in order to step up their climate ambition and increase, in general, the collective climate commitments. So here you have the full list of those commitments and declarations. Some of them were already existing, like the Fossil Fuel Free Street Declaration, the 100% renewable energy commitment, the Edmonton Declaration, the Powering Past Coal Alliance, and the Green Bond Pledge. What has happened around GCAS is that we have reboosted those commitments. We have accelerated them and started to recruit them again to gain more signatories and more impact. And some commitments that are highlighted here in yellow have been created specifically for GCAS. One very ambitious commitment on net zero carbon building, another one on waste, towards zero waste, and finally a new equitable community-based climate action pledge that I will detail in a minute. Next, please. So now that we are 1 week before the GCAS, actually, we are very proud to say and to observe and to communicate that the GCAS City Challenge has been extremely successful, and has proven that this event has created a fantastic acceleration of city climate action in some key sectors, in the key sectors that are mentioned here, which are related to the declarations I mentioned before. I really insist on this because it's quite unique to see such a good connection between a global conference and a political process globally and local climate action. In this occasion, what GCAS has achieved is really to accelerate climate action within the cities, thanks to the commitments that the mayors have taken before GCAS. And this is really unique and impressive and brilliant. And I think this will be one of the big lessons learned and positive outcome of this summit, and hopefully a model to follow for next meetings. So the particular sectors where city climate action has accelerated thanks to GCAS is around the idea of planning for emission neutrality by 2050, and particularly to achieve the goal of 1.5 degree Celsius of global warming by the end of this century, which is the most ambitious goal of the Paris Agreement. An important number of cities have taken the commitment to achieve emission neutrality by 2050, and the final number of those will be announced in GCAS, but I can tell you it has increased dramatically in the last month. Same for net zero building, the building sector, which is, as you know, the most significant source of emission, of GHG emission in cities. With the net zero carbon building declaration that has been created for GCAS, a lot of mayors, by August 23rd, 19 mayors had signed up to this declaration, and there will be more announced next week in San Francisco. So they have committed to ensure that every new home, every office or every workplace that is being built in their city is zero carbon by 2030. This is a major commitment in terms of ambition, and it has been taken by an important number of cities. So this is a very good outcome of this summit. The zero emission mobility, where the mayors basically commit to making a major city area to be zero emission by 2030, but also to procure only zero emission buses by 2025, of course, to create clean air zones and promote a shift to walking and cycling. This also has been accelerated a lot for GCAS, and we're very proud to have now more than 20 cities who have taken this commitment. For zero waste, again, another new commitment that has been created for GCAS, which is extremely ambitious because the mayors pledged to working to divert at least 70% of their waste from disposal or incineration by 2030. Last week was announced a first batch of cities taking that commitment, 23 at the moment, but we expect more to be announced by next week. So an important leadership from the mayor in the sector of waste. 100 renewable energy. This is particularly a commitment that has been led for a long time by ICLE, and we're very glad to see that there are some impressive numbers of cities who have already taken 100% renewable energy targets. That means procuring only 100% energy from renewable sources between 2030 and up to 2050. The final number will be announced next week, but there is also a very good progress in this sector. And finally, equity, which has been a central topic in the work, the political work around this summit, making sure that all these actions in the different sectors that cities are taking are driven by a sense of equity and inclusive climate action, and that the projects that are being implemented in the frame of those commitments are community-led and equitable. And a lot of cities also and mayors have expressed their pledge in their sense. Next, please. So what I've just presented is a flavor of the city political outcome of the summit, which is really the most important. And all this is going to be included into the final political document of the summit as a whole, which is a call to action, which will be presented by the co-chairs of the summit to the UN after the summit, in particular during UNGA and COP24. This call to action will ask national government to increase their ambition in line with science, and particularly in light of the 1.5 special report of the IPCC, take the necessary steps to ensure long-term transition and starting to plan seriously for carbon or emission neutrality by 2050. And a very strong call to work collaboratively with non-state actors, of course, who have, during this summit, showed their leadership. This call will be completed by several policy ask annex, one for each of the challenge areas we've described before, that presents the outcome of each area. So in the case of sustainable community, we will include the outcomes I've just presented with the updated numbers and the number of cities who have taken the commitments and the impact those commitments are expected to have in terms of GHG reductions, and also perhaps in some aspects like air quality and number of deaths prevented, etc., etc. And then, of course, the call to action will also include a series of key policy measures that national governments are expected or should implement to support the climate action by non-state actors in the different areas. So for the city policy ask, it's particularly on climate action planning, buildings, transport, urban mobility, waste, and equitable climate action, very much in line with the topics that cities have developed for the summit. So there is going to be a very strong political outcome, as you can see, in this summit, and we're very pleased with that, because that was really the original intent of this conference, and it has brilliantly achieved its goals. Next, and last slide for me. I know you're burning to know much more details on the logistics, the program, who's speaking where. Unfortunately, I don't have time here to present on this, and I thought political outcome was really the most important. But I can tell you that over 60 mayors are confirmed to attend GCAS, that the summit itself will be a 2-day program of high-level sessions and sorry, can you go back? Thank you. Plenaries and breakouts. There are a number of very high-level speakers, mayors, CEOs, governors, heads of states also, and celebrities, of course, happening in California. We can expect that. More than 3,000 attendees and more than 500 affiliate events are happening that week in San Francisco. So for all the information, I invite you to visit the website of the summit, and more questions on programs, any kind of information you want to have. You have here the contact emails from C40, ICLE, and Global Covenant of Mayors. who will be able to answer your question. Thank you, and I hand over to Yunus.
Thank you, Emmanuelle, for this impressive presentations. It's really exciting to see that things are really shaping up well for GCAS next week. Yunus, over to you for providing some more updates on how ICLEI specifically is engaging at GCAS.
Let's stay with your screen, Jisun, because then you will continue with the Marrakesh Partnership. First of all, I also would like to thank Emmanuelle both for her efforts and her time to share the updates with us. As you have heard, this is a really unique experience in the way it's structured, and I think there will be a lot of lessons learned for future, and we hope this would be increasing the overall ambition and the NDCs and collectively. So we know there are a number of this will be just a summary of how ICLEI is involved. Yes, we are supporting the official summit through the One Planet Challenge, the One Planet Charter, and our engagement with the Global Covenant. As mentioned, there's around 300 events or 500 events, I don't know the number. It is impossible almost to track all these. We recommend you to continuously check the website. From ICLEI side, we have a number of events on several days. It's mainly led in collaboration with ICLEI US as our core leader of this engagement. So on the 11th of September, we have a number of events on Low Emission Solutions Conference, 100% renewables and divest, and an event in Alameda. On the 12th of September, Climate Heritage Mobilization, WWF, award ceremony, Cities for Climate, Talanoa Dialogue, we will contribute. On the 13th of September, there is in addition to the summit, there will be a board meeting of the Global Covenant. There will be an event of the International Urban Collaboration of the European Commission, a side event of the BMUB, and one of our ICLEI members, Assisi, is hosting an event we'll support. On the 14th, there will be the Summit of the North Americans on the 100% renewable finance. Talanoa, Beijing Environmental Bureau, and Australian Capital Territories will host their events. In the additional ICLEI releases, we have been working on additional initiatives or announcements where ICLEI will announce its vision on climate neutrality. We will release our divestment case study and another report on Clear Path. We will update on Transformative Actions Program. There is not listed here, but there was a revised and a more fresh version of the slide, which will be circulated in the participants of this summit webinar, which includes an engagement of ICLEI of cities with nature to connect to the cities for trees. And there is a plan for a discussion on ocean, climate, and cities towards U.S. Conference of Mayors in Honolulu. And this is a summary of our input. We heard a number of LGMA members like Energy First and others are also hosting a number of side events. As I said, we don't know how to track all these. We will do our best to circulate the announcements from our capacity as much as possible. Once again, this is different than our mission and role in the LGMA process. Therefore, we would like to request understanding of all our partners in certain difficulties and challenges of this process, but we will do our best to share the news as much as possible. In the agenda of this webinar, the next agenda was and is the UNFCCC process, but I see a question because of the GCAS section here. Jisun, would you like to immediately go that so that we advance after responding to this question?
Sure. So we have a question on GCAS from Sarah. So the question is more information about the criteria to be invited to the summit and how to make contributions to the outcome document. So Emmanuelle, I think this question is for you. So over to you.
Thank you, Jisun, and happy to answer this question. So one thing that has been very important in the planning of the summit is to differentiate participation and commitments. physical attendance, and political contribution. In terms of political contribution, as I explained before, the main channel has been the GCAS City Challenge under the One Planet Charter. So what cities have been invited to do is to subscribe one or more of the commitments that have been offered, and declarations that have been offered under the One Planet Charter in that occasion. Or also they have the possibility to showcase and report on existing climate action that they are doing in their city, as long as it is ambitious and it really creates an acceleration of action. So if you know of cities who are interested to join this political movement, please don't hesitate to give them our contacts both at C40 and ICLE, and we will be happy to help them make those political commitments. So that is, I would say, perhaps the more important way of participating in GCAS for cities. Now, the physical attendance, it's an invite-only event. Most of the people part of the LGMA constituency or the Global Covenant community or the Global Task Force have been invited to attend at the executive level in particular, and a lot of them are in fact attending. And in terms of mayors, there has been over 200 mayors invited to attend as well. In terms of the actual speaking opportunity, it really depended on the level of ambition and the new contributions that those people were able to bring to the table. This has been a really clear principle set by California and agreed by all the co-chairs and the steering committee of the summit, that the ones who were to speak at the summit are really the ones bringing something new and something very ambitious on the table. So this has been a very long process precisely to link the political commitments with the participation and the speaking opportunity that is now concluded. So you will see the results of this process next week in California if you are planning to attend. And if not, I think it will be live streamed most of the time, at least in the plenary sessions.
Thank you, Emmanuelle. I think with that, we will move to now Marrakesh Partnership for Global Climate Action. First of all, I would like to highlight that there's been 2 focal points now nominated to be serving as co-focal points for the Human Settlements content group. One is myself from ICLE, and the other co-focal point will be Sarah Kupka from Energy Forestry. So the 2 of us will then be working towards COP24 in consolidating the input for diverse work streams, including the concept notes for COP24 Human Settlements Events. Now, let me first start with there are various work streams under the MPGCA, but let me start with the EBook process, the guidelines for which have been announced only days before, and now we have some more clarity. For those of you who remember the EBook process from last year, it was a survey-based process. So each of the organizations were invited to provide input through that survey online system. This year, the Secretariat announced that in order to ensure maximum efficiency and to also make use of the existing input, they decided to draw upon as much as possible to the following sources that I've listed here, so including the COP23 outcome documents from the content groups, from their action events, and also the input that's still quite fresh from the 27 ebook, as well as the ones that have been submitted already for the Talanoa dialogue online platform. And also there are the thematic action trackers that stakeholders have worked together including at the workshop in Lisbon this year. And also another input that will be utilized will be diverse input that have resulted from various other processes relevant to the GCA, such as technical expo meetings on mitigation and adaptation, GCAS, and also the New York Climate Week and regional climate weeks. The most recent one took place in Montevideo in Uruguay. And also NASCA data providers' input will then also be utilized to form input for the 2018 ebook. But the Secretariat did say, should we have any other highlights that we would like to flag to the high-level champions, then we have to do so, and we have a concrete deadline to observe, which is the 21st of September. And this input has to be sent to this Global Climate Action at unfccc.int. So if we have any input that are not covered by the previously mentioned sources, then it will be then suitable to be flagged to the high-level champions, including some specific areas of significant progress, and also some other documents that have not been announced yet, but will be announced by mid-November, for example, can also be sent to the high-level champions for their consideration. So we highly encourage all the stakeholders in the LGMA family who would like to do so, then please follow this email address as well as the deadline. Now, let me move on to the COP24 and how the MPGCA will then be engaged at COP24 itself. So updates on this have also been shared with us a couple of days before, and we have a lot more clarity now when it comes to what will actually unfold in Katowice. So according to this plan that is approved by the high-level champions, we have this sequence of events starting from the opening event, which is going to be a press briefing, and then there are 7, as you know, there are 7 content groups under the MPGCA. So these 7 groups will then have their own action events. Last year it was more like a day long, but this year it's 3 hours each allocated to each of the content groups. And then there are roundtables on interlinkages, as well as cross-cutting roundtables, as well as SDGs roundtables. And then to round it all up, there will be a high-level event on GCA, which is a mandated event by the COP. And then one element that is still to be determined is this amphitheater idea for serving as an action hub. But more information on this will then be shared by the Secretariat in due course. Actually, more on this I will touch upon in my later slides, because there is going to be a webinar convened by the Secretariat GCA team today at 2 p.m. Bonn time. Now, all of this looks like this in a graphic, basically. So as you can see, on Thursday, we start from the press conference as a GCA opening. And then we have a cross-cutting roundtable on climate finance. And on Friday, we start having these 7 different action events by the 7 different content groups. So human settlements, industry, transport, water, oceans, energy, land use will then have their own 3-hour slots on Friday and Saturday. And then the cross-cutting roundtables will start. So starting from roundtable on SDG 12 in the Saturday afternoon. And on Monday, there will be SDG 8 and 9 roundtables. And we have a cross-cutting roundtable on resilience, and then interlinkages roundtables on different thematic groups in the afternoon of Monday. And then the mandated high-level event of GCA will then take place sometime between Tuesday and Wednesday. So this is, as of now, the most recent information that we've been informed of by the Secretariat, and I believe more clarifications will then be made at the webinar that we will have today at 2 p.m. Now, there's a guidelines document that was recently announced. This was also a day or 2 before on how the COP24 event preparations should be made. So that information contains basically 1 document on MPGCA guidelines and 1 document on a concept note template, and the other document on the outcomes document template. So there are timelines to be met, especially when it comes to filling out the concept notes for events at COP24. So the preliminary draft has to be done by the 21st of September. And then the Secretariat is planning an in-person meeting whose tentative dates are 10th and 11th October. And during that time, more or less, all the concept notes should be finalized. And with a quick succession of deadlines in the week of 15th, 19th, there will be a final publication on the UNFCCC website on the 22nd of October of all the MPGCA events concept notes. So it's quite a tight deadline, and then we as co-focal points for the human settlements, me and Sarah have been asked through those guidelines to work together to basically to facilitate this process, so that the timelines could be met. So more on this I will touch upon later in my slide. So this is what I was alluding to, the Marrakesh Partnership meetings. So the first one will take place today at 2 p.m. Bonn time. And this is a link that you can go to join the webinar. And the recent documents, the guidelines documents and a concept note and outcomes document templates can be found in the open platform of the Secretariat, whose address is at the very first bullet. And last but not least, the in-person workshop is scheduled, but the dates are still tentative. At the moment, it is set on the 10th and 11th. Now, we are moving to updates on the Bangkok session, and I would like to give the floor to Yunus on this. Yunus, over to you.
Thank you, Jisun, both for covering the updates on Marrakesh Partnership. I will get back to the connection to Marrakesh Partnership to COP agenda in the next slide. But in the UNFCCC process, of course, if you could follow, this week there is an interesting or important 1 week session is taking place. This was agreed in June in Bonn, that in order to reach to Katowice with more prepared text for negotiations, there was a need for additional discussion sessions. This is taking place in Bangkok. Because of the need for focusing on the Paris Agreement work program to be consolidated, this session did not have any side events, and they are encouraging that the negotiators are not disturbed further. Due to also the time limitations, there are not too much opportunities to interventions, but there may be opportunities for uploading our positions. We can get back to that again, which we can send as LGMA. What we have been observing is that in the Paris Agreement rule work program, we can come up with an emphasis that they should refer to the preamble that emphasizes on multi-level governance. In the Paris Agreement, there are certain texts on adaptation and capacity building, which is relevant for us, that there should be clear definitions of how our engagement are clarified. We believe there is a need for a careful understanding of Article 6.8, which says the non-market approaches. This is basically, if you can all remember, in the Kyoto Protocol, there was the emphasis that there was flexibility mechanisms so that those who have responsibilities can work with parties who do not have responsibilities. But Paris era is a different one, and these flexibility markets will have a totally different looking, and there's also a need to increase those opportunities through different mechanisms. And here we believe there is a need for the nations to say that sustainable urban development can also be an interesting non-market approach. If we can ensure that a future urban development is decarbonized, this could also be considered as an input to the process. This is particularly the case for developing countries, of course. And this, of course, would open new opportunities for investments and finance to our constituency. And the last is that in the next year, there will be additional discussions on global stocktake. And we believe the Talanoa spirit that is created this year should be continued. Obviously, there's the concerns that there is no clarity on how would Talanoa discussions or Talanoa style will continue in Katowice or in beyond. And we would like to make sure that this is not fading away so easily, that certain experiences, certain practices should continue either by the UNFCCC or with a coalition that is embarking on these ideas. Towards COP, in terms of the agendas, let's say, let's recall this year was particularly unique because there was regional climate weeks in Singapore and in Montevideo over the past months, in July and August. The constituency of local and regional governments were very actively involved there. There were representatives from C40, CDP, ICLE, both at political leaders and staff level. As you have seen, the Bangkok negotiations, as far as I know, we know there's no representative from LGMA, but if we are missing any information, please keep us, and if there's any delegation, let them inform us. Other than GCAS, of course, there is this environment ministers meeting in Canada for G7. There may be several discussions because for the first time in the history of G7 heads of state communique, there was a reference to all levels of government, and this was in the climate agenda. There may be some engagement from Canadian cities or Federation of Canadian Municipalities who were working for that. ICLE Canada office will also try to enforce some openings, and we will get back on more information on that. Climate Week is taking place in New York, and we know there will also be, including in a connection to that, a summit of One Planet Charter or One Planet summit that was held by the auspices of the French President Macron. The Talanoa dialogues, as we have seen, so many of them are taking place. In October, in the beginning of October, there will be a special session of IPCC. In fact, it's a plenary of IPCC. It's not just 1.5 special report, but it's also a moment where the city's IPCC results are presented for approval, so that this process from now until the 7th assessment report with a special report on cities is now kicked off with including a research agenda for cities. And for the 1.5 special report, the lead authors involved in this 1.5 special report, there's a number of urbanists. Our colleagues are working on a couple of ideas. We are hearing that they would like to come up with some ideas. At the moment, we don't have the authority to release any official information from our side, but we believe this could be a good opportunity to engage with local and regional governments. The 1.5 special report, how it is adopted by IPCC, would be clarified in October. We heard in Poland there will be a pre-COP on 24 of October. We don't know what modalities for engagement will be there. In Buenos Aires, at the end of October, there's the first Urban 20 Summit, which will be also a unique opportunity to influence the global discussions. And we know there is another climate conference on biodiversity in Egypt in November, which also has a strong relevance to climate action. But even more importantly, this is the only global framework where there is a specific action plan for cities and regions or subnationals, which is being implemented since 2010, and it will be concluding in 2020. This year is the starting of a revision of this action plan, and we believe there's a huge value that experience can also be inspired in the climate negotiations, or vice versa. The Talanoa spirit in climate can also feed into that. So we'll see. ICLE and Energy Forestry are working on this front. At COP, you heard from Jisun that there is a certain element of Marrakesh Partnership. We all know the limitations and the unique opportunities through Marrakesh Partnership in connection to champions. We believe there is a value in the Marrakesh Partnership that has to be successful. There are still concerns from several parties that they don't want to lose too much time. There are certain values in these points, but to connect the action agenda to negotiations is important. That's the most added value of the Marrakesh Partnership. Because of the logistical and political challenges, we are expecting that, especially for observers, there will be an extremely conservative participation in Katowice. This may also be one of the reasons why you see, or you heard from Emmanuelle, that they're talking about 3,000 participants. Most of the time we know that this is from stakeholders, be it NGOs, be it scientists or local and regional governments or business. We believe there is a logic between a huge participation in California and very likely a weak participation in Katowice. So we have to make the synergy between these two. Until so far, we believe there is not the necessary conditions to convene a summit in Katowice with the city of Katowice for a variety of reasons. Things may change. We cannot guarantee anything until it is announced. But therefore, our tendency is that, or our expectation is that we may expect on the second week, first Monday, or the Monday of the second week, 10th of December, in the evening, city of Katowice may host an extended reception to celebrate cities and regions Talanoa dialogues and convene a networking opportunity between participants and the delegations. In the UNFCCC, we are expecting to have a number of pavilions, but the space, it's still not clear. The host country are expected to make some new announcements even today in California, or sorry, in Bangkok. As of today, we don't have too much clarity on that. How many will be eligible? What is the space size? Due to this lack of clarity, as ICLE, we're not planning or preparing for any cities and regions Talanoa or cities and regions pavilion, but instead we're in touch with European Union. We're in touch with some countries like Germany or China or others, where they can host several pavilions, and there in these pavilions we can explore that there will be specific cities and regions focused events. And if we can plan this in a sequence, that in a couple of days we can have a series of events following to each other so that participants can feed from one to the other. As you have seen, technical events on Marrakesh Partnership will take place in the first week, which is also very limited, only one event with 3 hours. Therefore, we should also be realistic who can speak and how long in this event. Therefore, our recommendation is much more our side events to be scheduled around Monday, Tuesday, or the second week, but there is also risks on that. So we still have to see. The applications for sides are closed already. We expect a number of them could still happen in the second week. One of our goals is that because there will not be a major or cities and regions summit, there will not be 2 big pavilions. We would like to do our best that during this event in the second week, as maximum possibility of our delegations having interaction with ministers through these kind of events at the pavilions. And this is so far what we're expecting. Once again, the number of mobilization in terms of the numbers who have access to the UN, the organization of these several pavilions are still not announced. We know there's huge difficulties on finding hotel rooms in Katowice. It's under all these conditions, we are all encouraging to keep expectations as low as possible. Those who are in Katowice should be more representative, that can speak on behalf of us, that can convey outcomes from different events throughout the year, so that we also honor how our delegations are there, but also be respecting that if they are there, they should receive a good opportunities of visibility and public appearance. The last slide is that beyond COP24 is also as important as towards COP24. One reason is that in 2019 we will have the UN Climate Summit in September. This is also the process where the second NDCs are much more now being clarified or shaped. Therefore, beyond Katowice is as equally important as Katowice itself. In 2019, we have a number of UN agendas. One is UN Habitat Governing Council. You may have observed there is certain progress from UN Habitat to get closer to the SDGs and climate agenda. Therefore, we expect this to be important. And UN Environment Assembly will focus on sustainable consumption production. with a specific theme. This will also be a core discussion in Katowice, but also at the 2019 UN Climate Summit, especially the procurement power of local governments, local and regional governments, where ICLE is also working a lot, and especially with UNEP, on sustainable procurement. This will become a hot topic in this year and next year. City of Heidelberg, sorry for the typo here, will host a special event, International Climate and Cities Action, International Cities and Climate Action in Heidelberg in May 2019. In June, there will be the UNFCCC Typical Traditional Climate Conference. This is the 50th session, but this is also this year overlapping with the Resident Cities Congress that ICLE is hosting since 2010. And this year, based on the previous commitment on the Nairobi Work Program, there is a plan for have a specific science policy practice dialogue. This is particularly important if we have a good outcome from IPCC plenary on cities IPCC. Therefore, the June session of UNFCCC is expected to be more ambitious now. We hope the Talanoa spirit can continue during the year with initiatives like NDC Partnership. We can build on the experience of this 2018. During 2019, a number of global networks will have their own global summits, and this is an opportunity for us to raise our partnerships and collaboration and raise our profile. C40 will decide and announce their summits soon. UCLG has already announced it will be in Durban in the 18th to 22nd of April, November, I'm sorry. And of course, the year will conclude with December 2019 at COP25. Surprisingly, at the moment, nobody knows where it will be. In terms of region, it's Latin America. There was at certain point a momentum from Brazil, but this was blocked by their own internal regional discussions. And we also are following, as you all may have seen, there is elections in Brazil coming up. What will be the new position of the Brazil government? Some of the candidates are already announcing that they would like to follow the suit of the Trump administration. If this happens, whether it's realistic to have a COP in Brazil, it's I think open for question. Therefore, this will be shaped, we believe, by the latest in Katowice. So still to be clarified. Of course, this impacts, for example, the high-level champions of the Marrakesh Partnership has to be coming from the presidency. If we don't know the presidency, if we don't know their position, it will also be a bit difficult to advance on Marrakesh Partnership. So all these impact each other. But the key message is that we as a constituency, local and regional governments, wherever we are, we would be engaged with partnerships, but we should continue to act together to increase our collaboration, to work together and as a constituency to the extent possible. This is more and more important than ever, considering the political challenges in many countries of the world or in the regions of the world. That is our concluding remark. And final points, we have uploaded our brochures on Talanoa dialogues and reporting guide, and our official COP23 report is also finally available. This was a bit delayed. We will circulate more about this. The recording of this webinar will be made available. The PowerPoint will be shared after the presentation this afternoon. Unfortunately, because of the working load of this agenda, we have a huge, certain, let's say, extended session. So Jisun, maybe now I give the floor to you, whether we can have any input from our colleagues if they're still staying with us, maybe 5, maximum 10 minutes, an additional time remaining.
Thank you, Yunus. Yes, we have a rapt audience still with us, but I don't see any other questions on the questions box, but I do see a hand raised by Kobe. Kobe, did you want to come in for any questions? Because I see your hand raised.
She told me that it was not a specific request, but if maybe things may have changed, and we can still also say that any participants can still raise their hands or ask questions. This is the opportunity. And thanks for your patience in being online listening to this webinar, which is really lasts for minimum 1 hour.
Right. So I see the hand from Kobe not visible anymore. So are there any other questions, ladies and gentlemen, from the floor? Now is your chance to do so. Well, I still see none.
Yeah, I think, I mean, as I said, as we said, we can conclude. and we can stay in touch with updates. We are also observing some of our colleagues are leaving the webinar due to the time is over. Jisun,
right,
if you like, you can conclude and like to thank all of you, and also Emmanuelle especially joining us.
Yeah, I would like to echo that. So thank you so much, Emmanuelle, for joining us today. And also, we look forward to having you again at the 4 p.m. session. And thank you, Yunus, for once again for all the updates and helpful information. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our webinar. As Yunus mentioned, the recording of this will then be shared with all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. This webinar is closed.